Maddie and I'm just going to do a really quick personal introduction. So Maddie and I go way back too. We actually met a million years ago when I was just launching Content Academy, and Maddie was in the meetup group, and she said she would write some content for me. And I remember thinking that, wow, this girl really knows how to do it, and it worked out well for her. She's went on to create her own company called the Blogsmith, and I know she's a well sought after content creator today. I actually am at the point where I was not worried if she was going to say no to my proposals to her to speak at this event, and I'm so happy you said yes. So Maddie, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Maddie to the Creative Year Ever Summit, and Maddie is going to tell us how to write a kick-ass blog post, and that's one thing I love about you is you have a great personality, and it shows in your content. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my spotlight, and you're welcome to take it away, Maddie.
All right, well, thank you so much for that lovely intro, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my slides here so you guys can all see that. Let me know if for whatever reason you can't see what I'm trying to show right now, but otherwise I'm just going to go ahead and dig right in. So I don't think I need to say too much more about myself, but if you want to learn a little bit more about like clients I work with and some of the content I've created, check out theblogsmith.com. As it relates to this topic, I thought it might also be interesting to give you guys a little bit of a background in terms of my blogging and, you know, outside of work and kind of more on the fun side of things. I started blogging with a lifestyle blog. It was called Chicago Cheap Ass. It was me finding deals and kind of like living in the city on a budget. I live in Denver now, so it's kind of a defunct blog. But I also started another blog that you could check out if you want another example of how I'm putting these things into practice, which is called tanksthatgetaround.com, like tank tops. It's travel, like funny sort of stuff. And so those are a couple of different blogs I've launched for myself. And then obviously I also create content for a lot of clients. So I have a lot of stuff to get through, so I'm going to go kind of fast. So this is just the basics of what a kick-ass blog post is. It all starts with a goal. Any marketing you do should really start with some sort of goal in mind. And for the sake of this presentation, the goal is to create something useful. There is so much content that's already out there that it doesn't really make sense to be creating stuff that's, you know, an echo of something that already exists. You know, there's just so much that out there for people to consume that you want to be creating something that actually adds value. So a couple things to keep in mind. Consistent formatting. We're going to talk later in this talk about how to create a style guide for your brand. I'm going to share mine with you that you could use as baseline. Another thing is engaging visuals. It's really not just all about the text. And if there's only text in your final blog post, then you've done something wrong. Long form is another thing that I would consider to be a tenet of high quality. And there's exceptions to every rule, but in general, if you're going to be creating content to answer questions for people that are looking to get answers, it's probably going to need to have some length to it in order to sufficiently answer those questions. And so that kind of leads us to the last thing, which is answer readers' questions. We're going to talk about how to do that in terms of Google data. So I won't say too much right now. I did want to loop in. Scott is, you know, still local to Chicago. Orbit Media is Chicago. They do web design, they do some SEO stuff, and they're an awesome agency, really well known and someone to follow when it comes to learning how to create great content. So just a couple things from them. First is create the best resource possible for the topic, and that kind of leads to the second point, which is to keep tabs on the competition so you can beat them. It's really hard to create great content that's going to outrank your competition unless you take the time to look at what that content is. And then they publish this blogger survey every year, and I participate in it every year. And they just ask questions of bloggers like, you know, how long does it take you to create the average post? How long is it? You know, other questions about sort of like the productivity behind the process. And so it's really interesting to look at that survey and how trends change over the years. But in general, just going back to this idea of long form content, that's something that every year in the Orbit Media Blogger survey, that always goes up, the length of content. So that's, again, why I'm sort of defining high quality content as being longer form. And if you don't know what like longer form is, it just means that it's like more words. So shorter form content I would define as something like 500 words or less, and longer form is more of that like 1,000 plus, 1,500 words, and so on. So I forgot to mention on Twitter, which you can see my usernames in the bottom right-hand corner, I put a link to all my slides. So you can grab those, you can follow along, you can click all the links and stuff that you'll see as I go through. So go ahead and grab that if you're interested. I'm sure there's a lot of beginners in this audience, but I wanted to also include some advanced tips. And so when it comes to trying to do better than your competition, if you're using any of these SEO tools, these all-in-one SEO tools like Ahrefs or Moz or SEMrush, most of them have a feature like this content gap analysis, which basically allows you to plug in the URLs of your competition and see what they're ranking for, what that your domain isn't ranking for. So that's another thing, to find topics where maybe you could beat the competition, depending on things like, I don't want to get too far into metrics, but things like domain authority, which is just the measure of how many websites are linking to your website and sort of the strength of those links. So that's what a tool like this can do. It can help you find realistic topics that you could beat the competition on based on things like domain authority. When it comes to coming up with blog topics, you have to start with idea generation. They don't come out of nowhere. We've talked a little bit about using the competition to come up with ideas, but here are a couple other places that you could go. Following podcasts in your industry, reading books by thought leaders, going to conferences and just listening to what's going on around you, both in the sessions and even what people are talking about and what they're interested in. Same thing with colleagues that you might work with, reading other blog articles, subscribing to industry news, and then also paying attention to when you have a specific topic in mind and put it in on Google and see kind of like what Google is telling you. I'm not going to get into this too much right now because we're going to dig into what these Google search features tell us later, but these are all really great places to find ideas. Once you have ideas, you want to make sure that you are documenting them. And I think it's really easy. I don't know why it's doing that. I think it's really easy to, if you don't have a system for keeping ideas, to just lose them. I mean, we're all so busy. There's a million things going on in our daily lives all the time where you might have an idea and then you jump to something else. I still don't know why it's doing that. But I might have to wait, there's a timer thing. Okay, I figured it out. I'm just going to change this to 60 seconds so it doesn't mess things up. Okay. Anyway, all that is to say, I use Evernote. That's my preferred place to grab ideas. You might be a little bit more analog. So I also have this thing called Rocketbook. It looks like this. I don't know. I won't be able to show you because I have my virtual background on and it's just not worth getting rid of that right now. So anyway, you can see the picture here. It's just a book and it has ink that you can write, and then you use water to erase it. So it's kind of like a cool mix between analog and digital because it also allows you to digitize your notes by scanning it. So just a couple tools that I use that might be useful to you. But anything, I mean, a plain notebook is better than nothing. You also want to create a system for organizing your ideas. It's not enough to just throw them in Evernote and try to recall them at some point. So I use anything that has like a Kanban board. So this is from Notion, and I just have different rows, columns, I think it's rows, for different stages of publication. So the idea, where maybe I don't have anything but the idea, maybe, the in progress stuff is stuff that I've done a little bit of research on. In review is probably something that I've already finished. Update needed is maybe something I've written before and want to revisit. Maybe the stats are out of date or something like that. And then I also have a column for when stuff is published. So write your ideas, organize your ideas. Don't get stuck on the tool. I do like when they have the Kanban view. I would say that's probably the most important thing, but you might work a different way. I've also used Trello really effectively, but again, there's a million different ways to go about it. So when you're writing your blog post, you're probably going to do some research, and a couple different things to think about in terms of the links that you use to get your information. One, are they an authority in the industry? So like Search Engine Journal would be one for SEO, or like Social Media Examiner would be a great one for social media. Is the information timely? Because if I grab an article from Search Engine Journal from 5 years ago, it may already be outdated at this point. It really depends on the industry, how important timeliness is. Like if you're writing about psychology, a lot of, landmark studies are from 20 years ago. So that might be okay. You have to use your judgment. Also, does it have a good reputation? And that kind of goes along hand in hand with being an industry authority. But another thing to consider, are they a trustworthy source? There is this metric that has recently come more into vogue with SEOs. I guess it's not so much a metric, but more of a guideline. It's called EAT. And now I'm totally blanking on what the E is, but the A is authoritativeness and T is trustworthiness. And it's just another way to sort of look at sources, and it's what Google uses to determine page quality. So that's kind of another way to think about finding expert resources. If you tend to focus on a certain niche, if you're a blogger for yourself, if you're a blogger for your company, and you're running a content team, why not, subscribe to these top resources in your niche? That'll just make it easier for you to come up with ideas, and also to see sources, interesting sources and things like that. I don't know why it's doing that, guys. I'm sorry. I'm using kind of a new slide thing. It's called Slide Bean, but I don't know if I'd recommend it now. But anyway, so just, be a student of your industry and make sure to follow, all these good resources. And another thing that is kind of, if you tend to use the same statistics, if you're noticing that you're using the same statistics over and over again, a good example would be something like, I write about SEO and user experience a lot. And so there's some sort of stat about how people are more likely to bounce from a page if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. So that's something that I quote all the time. So consider creating a system for storing statistics that you use all the time. And again, I just use Evernote for this. You can create tags, you can organize them in different notebooks. All of that is really useful for recalling information without having to dig it up again from the internet. It's also really important to, if you're pitching to another blog, or even if you have a blog where you have just a ton of content, make sure that you haven't already covered that topic. And so type this search query into Google, which is just the topic in quotes, and then cite semicolon, whatever the URL of the website is. It might be even better to add like /blog, wherever their blog's located, so you're not mixing in other content. But take a quick look and just make sure it hasn't been covered, especially if you're pitching for a guest post, because otherwise it's going to seem lazy if you're just pitching something they already have. When it comes to doing research, it's really easy to get inspired by the content that you are seeing and to perhaps unintentionally plagiarize that content. And so a couple tips to make sure that doesn't accidentally happen. First of all, don't just sort of like rewrite an article that already exists. In the SEO world, you might hear this referred to as content spinning. So this is just, kind of like adding synonyms, like just kind of like rearranging things slightly. Like that doesn't add value. Don't even start with that. We want to create something that's new and useful in some way. Also, another great tip that's worked well for me is to create your article structure, create an outline before you start doing research. So the research is just to find things like stats and quotes and things like that. Not so much to help you determine what the article is going to look like. So try to treat it that way. To create truly unique and useful content, one way to get original content to add in is by interviewing topic experts and also doing expert roundups. So, basically just like going to somebody who has knowledge that you could benefit from, that your audience could benefit from, and just, finding a way to get that from them. So let's talk a little bit about creating an outline for a kick-ass blog post. My goal when I'm doing this is to include everything that I need to set myself up for success while I'm drafting. So in other words, I want to include as much information as possible so that I don't need to use the internet while I'm writing my draft. And this is basically just to sort of protect my productivity. I don't want to get distracted when I'm looking up research or, trying to grab different things to put in. So a couple different things to include are things like a brief. So this is probably most important if you're working on a team with other people. And here's an example that I wrote for a client where we get into things like, like what's the category of the content, which I also tend to associate with whatever stage in the buyer's journey they're at. So it's really important to create content for people who are looking for answers right now, who may not be ready to buy, and then other people who are ready to buy, and then people who are kind of in the middle. And all of this stuff is kind of like a more advanced topic that I don't have time to get too deep into right now. But the point being that you're not just trying to reach customers who are ready to buy right now. You also have to, kind of build relationships with content. It has things like, the brief has things like, what keywords are we going for? And it's really important, I think I'm going to talk about this later, but it's really important to do keyword research prior to the outline, even, way before the draft, in the outline stage, because your keywords to some extent will dictate the structure of the article. Things like, what are the things that are necessary to include in this article? What are things we definitely don't want to include in this article? And, maybe provide some research material. And you could even go as far as, like I did here, to suggest a featured image, but that's taking things a little bit to the extreme. So the important thing is, like, what does this article need to include? Make sure that you have covered that in the brief. An advanced tip for briefing your content creation is to use tools like Phrase and ClearScope. These are both tools that I've added to my tech stack, I guess you could say, within the past year. And the screenshot you're seeing is ClearScope. Basically, the way it works is you feed it whatever your primary keyword is, and it goes through the top 10 results and finds what's called the entities within them. That's the wording that you see on the right-hand side. It's what in the top 10 results, words that come up frequently, so you can kind of reverse engineer those rankings for yourself. Phrase works very similarly, but I use it more as a topic brief because it suggests things like subheadings and statistics and things like that. So they're very similar, but they're also different. Other things to include are things like metadata. So I'm going to talk about this later too, but it's basically what you see in search when you type in a keyword. It shows you a title, it shows you a description, and you want to optimize those things so that people are interested in clicking through. You can have a meta title that's the same as your page title. So the page title is basically when you go on someone's blog and you're just sort of, going through and looking and you see the titles there. You can have a separate page title that people see and that's on your blog, and you can have a separate meta title that people see within search. And I think it's important to have two different ones because those are two different audiences. And you want to try to include keywords, but it's really more important that it's compelling if you have to make the choice. Take a stab while you're writing your outline at the introduction. Basically share the problem, the solution, and the reveal to hook the reader. So then once you've fleshed out your introduction, you can go into the specific sections that make up this blog post. So subheadings and bullets that support them. I like to try to add a new section every about 300 words or so. That seems to, keep it moving along nicely. You want to make sure that you're including whatever points you want to cover in the final article, and also any relevant stats or links so that you don't forget to use them. Then you're going to write the conclusion where you basically restate the problem. I also like to summarize key points covered in the article. Sometimes I do this in the intro, but you kind of got to pick one, whether you want to do it in the intro or the conclusion. Specifically, I like to do this as bullet points, but if you do in the intro having like bullet points about what you're going to cover in the article, then I wouldn't do bullet points in the conclusion too. So it's a personal taste thing. And then I also like to make sure to end with a call to action based on whatever the goal of what that content is being created for. So here are a couple call to action ideas, something like, tweet your thoughts at us, leave a comment, if you need more help with this. You could, if you have a relevant product to sell, you might share a link to that. You could also, if it's like a SaaS company, start a free trial or get in touch or book a demo. So all different things that you could consider using at the end of your blog article to get people to convert in some way. A couple extras I like to include during the outline stage, if I can. Twitter handles of any like links that I've used or any companies I've spotlighted, because then later on I could tweet at them and say, hey, check it out, I mentioned you in this article. Uh, Also image options. You may or may not want to handle this during the outline stage. I think a lot of the times it happens more at the end of the drafting stage, but in the spirit of trying to get as much stuff done as possible, adding specific images and source information. And then I also like to keep a separate list of any sources referenced or linked to. And you can see an example of that. I'm going to show you in a second, like what that looks like. As an advanced tip, and again, to sort of fight potential plagiarism, don't just copy and paste information like a statistic or quote or whatever. Well, maybe a quote. But take the time to rephrase it. If there's anything that you want to include that's not, directly the text you want to use, either do that or mark it in red so that you have a visual cue that you need to change it. Also, don't waste time calling out the obvious. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see from writers and also people who have helped me to create outlines in the past on my team. It's hard to explain this, but I think you'll start to notice it if you think about it. So here's my blog outline template. You can use this link to grab it. It'll show you how I format things in terms of, the links that I want to include, the keywords, and even some basic tips for how to create your format in the body copy. And again, you can grab that on Twitter. So I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about adding engaging visuals without getting too deep on it. The goal of using engaging visuals correctly is don't get sued. Don't take imagery from other people's websites without, properly sourcing it, without, making sure that you can actually use those images. Because even though it's on somebody else's website, they might have, a license to that image that they paid for. So just because it's online doesn't mean you can use it. Also, as a sub goal, be compelling with your images. So here's a couple stock photo sites. Pexels and Unsplash. Stop it. I don't know why it's doing this. Just hates me. I'm gonna try this one more time. So Pexels and Unsplash are kind of like the best free stock photos that you're gonna get. At the end of the day, if you're really serious about creating awesome blog content, I would highly suggest getting a subscription to one of these paid options here. And Vital Elements is really great, and it's more than just stock photo stuff. It's they have WordPress plugins, themes. They have books to help you with different technical like WordPress, web design, and even like graphic design stuff. They have a ton of stuff offered in their subscription, so that's why it's one of my favorites. Deposit Photos is also great. AppSumo, which is this marketplace for entrepreneurs, offers almost every year the option to buy credits, like 100 credits for $39 or something like that is the usual deal. And so that's a really nice cost-effective way to get a lot of access to image assets at a decent price. I still haven't used all mine, and I bought them like several years ago. And then Jump Story is kind of interesting because it's like an AI-backed stock photo search site, and you can also submit a request to them for images that you can't find on their site. So just a couple different things to think about. In general, the reason why I'm suggesting paid stock sites when possible is because people are kind of, I think, fatigued by the free ones that they see. They just come across them so often because everybody uses them, which is why you can get a leg up by paying for, some of your imagery. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of other legal to use images that you can incorporate. GIFs are a great thing. People love them. They're engaging. They make you stop, go on Giphy, and you could probably find anything you need. That's where I found this. Some sort of like relevant YouTube video could also be useful. And it's also engaging because people will click on it and stay on your site. And so that'll help your, site time metric on Google Analytics. Branded statistics. I love Statista for a lot of like the industry specific things I'm looking for. I can grab images on the free account. They do have a paid account option too for certain statistics. I've never needed to use that. You could also make your own branded statistics if you have a graphic designer or are handy with Canva. And then sometimes other brands will make these and they want you to share them. So that's another great thing to plug in. Having like expert quote images if you're doing expert roundups, which I talked about earlier, either making something where you're creating like an illustration of the person or just creating like a branded template where it just looks on brand but uses their headshot and incorporates like their title and their company they work for and stuff like that is also great. I also love, like, this is an example from an article I wrote about, like the emails you get to confirm e-commerce orders or something like that. And so here's just a caption for this specific example that I found to illustrate that point. And then also, I really love taking screenshots and annotating images. And again, it kind of depends on the topic, the niche, but I write a lot about WordPress and I'm showing people how to use it. And so this is a really effective way to sort of draw people's eyes to the right place. All right, sorry for the Blair Witch Project stuff that's happening right now. Another thing is, and I just talked about this, but you could hire someone or you could do this yourself, create images. I use this tool called Design Pickle. It's awesome. It basically gives you a queue that you can fill with as many requests as you want, and they, you know, handle a certain amount per day. But it helps me to get really cool on-brand images for my clients when I'm creating content for them. And it, you know, it gives your content an extra edge to have something that's truly unique to you. So a couple best practices to keep in mind when you're incorporating visuals. Do this for every image on the page. First of all, don't use grainy, fuzzy images. They got to be high resolution, pretty much like as wide and high as you can. Make sure that you're attributing sources and add captions. Man, I don't know. What is, maybe if I change this to like 5,000 seconds, maybe it'll, I'm so sorry, but you can definitely grab my slides after this and go back through. Make sure that you're incorporating keywords in the file name and alt tag. This is important from an SEO perspective, so whatever your primary keyword is. But also, while you're using alt tags, it's important to note that it's not just a place to add the keyword. They're there for accessibility. They're there for people who are using screen readers, people who might have issues seeing things on the screen. So use your keyword, but make sure that you're actually describing the image for that screen reader. Otherwise, you're misusing that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about creating a brand style guide. The goal is to produce consistent, that being the keyword, high quality content. So I'm going to show you my style guide. I'm going to give you a couple like high level things that I see all the time that people make mistakes on, or that, you know, could improve their content. So one is to write short sentences. If it takes up two lines, it's probably too long. And short paragraphs. So if it's more than 3 lines, it's also probably too long. Make it skimmable in general. So this kind of goes back to that first point. You want to add white space wherever you can. And using formatting tools like bullet points can help you to do that. So anything where you're like starting a list and it's more than 2 things is probably a good candidate for a bullet list. Make sure that your headings and anchor text is just the text that gets linked when you're adding like an external source or linking to an internal page or something like that. It should be descriptive, because those things are supposed to help people understand what they're going to see on the other side, what they're going to see on the other side of that link, what they're going to see within that subsection of your content. Also, make sure that you're within your style guide, adding descriptive words that describe your brand's voice and tone. So are we funny, or are we, you know, more reserved? You know, like what kinds of adjectives would you use to describe your brand? Make sure that you're communicating that so other people know too, that might be writing for you. You also want to make sure that you're just defining the perspective. Do you write in first person, you know, me, talking about your experience? Do you write, the most common is more like second person, where you're talking to the reader, you. There's also third person, where you're not really referring to either of them. It's a little bit more vague. Make sure that you're defining it so that you can be consistent. Also avoid cliches. People hate that. My favorite sort of reference point when it comes to style is the AP style book, and it's like 600 pages long. It's insane, but I don't read it through. I just use it as a reference point. So my suggestion to you would be to get access to this. I think it's something like $20 a year for like the online version of this, and you know, you can use that as your baseline and build up off of that. So if you want to see my style guide, you can follow this link, and I've added a screenshot of just like the table of contents that you'll see on the other side of this link, which includes things like how I cover headings, you know, how we handle SEO, keywords, and other on-page elements, how to format list items, how to self-edit, things like that. So you can check that out. I think it's like 12 or 13 pages long, so it's a beast, but it really helps to create consistency when I'm working with multiple different people and multiple different clients. I think even if you have a blog just for yourself, it's worth defining a style guide, although you probably don't have to go into that detail if that's the case. So let's get into writing your first draft. You want to make sure that you're in the right mindset to do this. And one of the easiest ways, and this is probably oversimplifying things, but one of the easiest ways to get in the right mindset is to just start writing. Just sit down, give it a try. The good news is if you've done the outline steps, this isn't going to be hard. You're not going to be dealing with a blank page. You're going to have some stuff that you can jump off of. Another thing that really helps me is to not overthink things when I'm writing. I'm just trying to get it down. I'm trying to get it done as fast as I can so that I can get to the editing stage. And so if there's like a word that I'm just not coming up with in my head, instead of going online and using a thesaurus or, whatever, I just add a placeholder, word like whatever. And that helps me to not be too distracted so I can just finish it. And on that note, I like to use the Pomodoro method when I am sort of deep in focus mode with writing my blog draft. The Pomodoro method just means that you set a timer, 25 minutes, you're on, you're totally focused. You don't look at your phone, you don't look at your email, like you're just writing. And then you spend 5 minutes taking a break, whatever you want to do. The point being that like you got to do both parts for it to work if you're going to use it like the whole day, because if you don't take the break, you're just going to get overloaded. But the intense focus has really helped me to the point where if I'm writing on average like a 500-word blog post and I have an outline, I can finish it in that 25 minutes because I've taken the right steps and I've cleared out distractions. When you are at the stage where you're ready to do an edit, where you have a completed draft, a couple tips that have helped me, because it's hard to get over your own bias when you're writing, because you think in your mind like, oh, I'm doing this the best I can. And, maybe like I work with a bunch of editors just by nature of having clients who have content teams and things like that on their own side. I'm fully expecting them to, come up with some edits on their own and, want me to change things. But before I get the blog to them, I want it to be the best version it can possibly be with no silly errors. And so a couple of things that I have to sort of do to trick myself to get in the mindset where I can adequately look over my own writing to find errors is, first of all, just doing a once over. Once it's all done, I wasn't focusing on it being perfect spelling, grammar, punctuation, agreement, whatever. While I was drafting, I was just trying to get it done. So the once over is like, what kind of stupid stuff did I do that I missed just because I was trying to get stuff done? Once that's done, I like to read the text out loud, because when you hear your voice doing it, instead of just reading with the voice in your head, if you hear it out loud, you're going to find a lot of like agreement issues or other things that just sound kind of funky that would be hard to pick up. You can use like text to speech programs too, if you'd rather do that and sort of, be ready to go instead of having to, use your own voice to read it. So that's another pro tip I would say. And then the last edit that I do is just like, is it really interesting? Like, did this adequately address everything in the brief? Is there something missing? Do I need to add anything? Is this content worth putting out into the world? So just a couple of things to think about while you're editing. We're going to talk a little bit about SEO. We're not going to go super deep into this because there's just so much to say, but I think there are a few basic things that, as a beginner, intermediate, advanced audience, you guys might benefit from. I put together, this is a paid product that I offer, but my keyword research process, like completely from start to finish, what I do for every new article. And I put together an ebook and also some video walkthroughs. So if that's something that you could benefit from and want to dig into, there's a link to do that. But let's talk a little bit about how you can find keywords using free Google tools and then how to implement them. So it really starts with like a primary keyword or some sort of topic or something like that, and then plugging that into Google. So let's just say my topic was seed keyword, because that's what I was using when I took these screenshots. But there's a couple of different things within Google that gives you hints about what stuff you want to put in your content, and also like the specific keywords you want to use to describe those things. So, I'm typing my search query into Google, whatever that primary keyword is that I want to use, and it gives me this autocomplete results that basically add extra words to whatever that specific keyword is. And these represent things that real searchers are searching. So that's why this data is so useful, because it kind of gives you other ways to think about a topic. It gives you other things to explore within a topic. You could also check out once you hit enter and you're on the search engine results page, which is just here's the search results that we think are the best fit for your keyword. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll see the searches related to area. And so this includes things that might be the exact keyword you typed in, but it also might be variations on that keyword. So these are things that Google thinks is related to the topic that you should probably consider including in your final blog post. There's also people also ask, and this is really interesting because it's questions, like specific questions that people ask about that topic. And there's another reason why, sort of this question mindset is important, and that has to do with featured snippets. So here's where we're getting a little deeper into the SEO side of things, but it's worth pausing for just a second. So the featured snippet, if you're looking at this screenshot, it's that thing in the bottom where there's like a border around it. It says SEO made simple, where and how to use keywords. So a featured snippet is just another feature of search. So Google has the organic results, they have the ads. You can see that here. There's 2 ads that precede it. They have other stuff that they add in addition to just the organic search results. And so featured snippets are also known as position 0, which just means that they usually come up at the very top of search results. Here they have some ads, but it's the first organic result. And usually they're structured in such a way that they are the response to somebody asking a question. Or in this case, I said how to use keywords. And so this is like answering the question of how to do that. There's a little bit of nuance in terms of how to effectively rank for featured snippets, but the gist is that you're answering a question. So again, that's why these people also ask searches are so important, because those are the questions that you essentially want to answer in your content, and you want to plug those back into Google to see how other people are doing that so that you can beat them. So again, this idea of competition is coming back into consideration, because at the end of the day, a lot of great content is already out there, and you want to, add great content to that, but in a way that it shows up, higher up than your competition. So that's like way oversimplifying things with featured snippets. It's something that I think you definitely are going to want to dig into deeper than besides just watching this presentation, but I wanted to bring it to your attention as sort of the future of SEO. It's worth mentioning that because you're optimizing this content to answer a question, the problem is that you might fully answer the question before somebody clicks through to go to your website. So the trick of being effective with featured snippets is to give them something to want to click through to learn more about, instead of just, kind of calling it a day with your answer. But again, getting a little bit deep into the SEO side of things, and also search intent is something a little bit on the deeper side of things. But we're going to focus on a couple things that are worth mentioning. First of all, search intent is just like, what does the person want when they're searching? How can we determine what they want based on the specific words they use? Navigational intent is something like somebody typing in like Facebook login or Gmail or whatever. They're just trying to get to some product that they probably already use. And there's, we probably don't want to optimize content for that unless for some reason, there's something we're coming across this query in like Google Search Console. You can see like some of the terms that people use to find your site. So if you see queries that have navigational intent, that's usually a sign that something's broken on your site. So again, we don't want to optimize for it. We want to like fix whatever the problem is. Informational intent is like those how-to queries. So these are people who are kind of in the middle of the sales funnel. There's someone who wants to learn, who's actively seeking answers to their question and trying to fix things, but they might not be ready to buy yet. But this is the most popular queries start with how to. That's like the most search term on its own. So you definitely want to create some content to address this informational intent. And then there's transactional intent, which is, these are like the money keywords. So it's stuff like somebody who's looking for like the top 10 TVs of 2021 because, you know, they're going to buy one. Or they might search like your brand name promo code because they're ready to buy and they're just trying to see if there's another discount. So these are other things like you could do comparisons between you and your competition. That would probably be a good transactional intent or quasi-informational intent query. And so the point of bringing all of this up is to, again, talk about the buyer's journey and to, again, reiterate that you want to create content for people who are ready to buy, who are not ready to buy, and for people who are kind of in the middle. So a couple of things to include when you're like uploading your content to your content management system. These on-page SEO elements essentially communicate to Google the context of your content by centering around whatever your primary keyword is. First of all, the URL where it lives. So there's kind of a hierarchy of importance in terms of where you're using keywords. This is one of the most important places to use whatever your primary keyword is. So it should be a part of your URL, kind of like you see here. And I would recommend that if you have your permalink structure set up to like also include dates or categories, get rid of that. Make sure that you're redirecting it properly if you already have that. And if you're using WordPress, you could use a plugin like Yoast or 301 redirects or something like that. Again, I don't want to get like too deep in the weeds here, but the point of not including those things is because it makes it easier for Google to understand what your content is about more quickly. Google has told us that page speed is a ranking factor. And even though it seems like a small thing to include extra data in your URL, it is ultimately going to make it harder and slower for Google to like parse the information of what's on your page. And so you just want to have your website load as quickly as possible with like as few barriers for Google to crawl out as possible. The meta description, we talked about this earlier in terms of metadata. So it's the description that displays under the title and search engine results page. And again, you want to include your keyword, but it's more important for it to be compelling. Subheadings, it's, you know, any tag that's like H2 to H6. So H1 is like the page title tag. It's also the meta title tag in most cases. You can only have one H1 per page, but you can have as many H2 to H6s, which are just subtopics of subtopics per page. And I tend to stick with mostly H2 subheadings and sometimes H3. The sort of deeper you get in, I think that's a sign that maybe you should split your content into multiple different posts. Because if you're getting to like an H6 tag, that means that you're getting into like super long content territory and people are probably not going to stick around and like read that whole page. So it might be better to create multiple topics, which also means more opportunities to rank. So subheadings should be descriptive and include keywords when possible. I like to aim for 3 to 5 maybe plus words in length in order to hit that sort of descriptive nature. I hate subheadings that are like one word because it gives me nothing about what's inside that section. There's no way for me to tell what I'm getting myself into. So recently, within the past year, Google updated their algorithm. There have been other big updates since then, but one that's worth noting here is called BERT. So it's called bidirectional encoder. Oh my God, I'm not going to get it. But anyway, it's this update that basically made it so that Google could read queries both the way that like you'd normally read something, but then also backwards. So Google used to only sort of understand queries one way, but now they can get more context from what we're searching for and then what they recommend. And so why that's important is because SEO, old school SEO was like, use the keyword as many times as possible, you know, just like stuff it in there and call it a day. That's not true anymore because of this, basically, because Google can get more context. So it's less important that you're using whatever like the exact wording of your keyword is. It's more important that you use it a couple of times, but also use the variations that we've talked about in terms of like the Google search features and the keywords that they recommended. My rule of thumb is like 4 times per 500 words, but I think even that might be more than you need, as long as it's like once or twice per 500 words. I think, that's kind of the way that we're trending towards the future. Make sure it's mentioned, but don't overdo it, is what I'm trying to say. Here's a couple ways that I incorporate my primary keyword into text if I'm, just kind of blanking on how to add it, or if it's like an awkward keyword. In the intro, after you kind of summarize what you're going to talk about within the blog topic, say, let's dig into this guide about whatever the keyword is. I also like to add a section on every blog that I write right before the conclusion to sort of announce it. And I say final thoughts, and then I just repeat the SEO title. And since I'm trying to use the keyword in the SEO title, it's probably already in there. Like, I don't have to like work hard to add the keyword. So I just repeat it. And then in the conclusion, I'll say something like, share your thoughts about whatever the keyword is in the comments. So those are a couple ways to, like, especially if you have awkward keywords, make use of them. And then I think this is my last section, which is just how to promote your content once you've created it. A lot of it has to do with social media. A lot of my tips have to do with social media. So one, on your blog, make sure you have some sort of social sharing buttons. I've used Social Warfare. There's other ones that you could use. There's free ones, there's paid ones. Just use something. The reason being that it gives people a visual cue and sort of a call to action to share. And, ultimately other people are probably going to be the best promoters of they're going to have the widest audience. If you can get other people to share it, like, that's golden. Adding click to tweets is another sort of variation on this theme, and this is something that Social Warfare also does, which is just like finding like an interesting point or a statistics or quote or something within the article and making it into something that's clickable that people can just automatically tweet. Make sure you're adding a Pinterest image. A lot of people don't do this, but Pinterest is such a goldmine of traffic. It's like the second highest social referrer of traffic to websites. So don't miss the opportunity to be a part of that. So open graph tags are like the specific title that you would see if you share something on Facebook, and the specific like or description, or like on Twitter and on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So make sure that you're customizing those. If you think they need to be different than like your page title, for example. You might also want to add on whatever your draft document is, some social share copy, like what you would use on Twitter. Make sure you add hashtags, if you would change that for Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that, add that too. Once it is live, I like to pin new articles to my Twitter and Facebook page, just give it a little bit of extra visibility. I use this tool called Missing Letter, where I basically just like feed in the URL and it creates a year of social posts, which sounds like a lot. It's really like 9, but they're spaced out throughout the year. And it's just a really cool tool because it uses like AI, some sort of machine learning functionality to go through your article and find like pull out quotes, and it makes these really cool images. I could give a talk just about that, but it's a really cool tool. But the main idea is just that you're, not just promoting your article when you publish it, but promoting it throughout the year because you put a lot of effort into it if you've, followed all these steps. And then Q Promote is another tool that's really cool. Basically, you submit whatever like your social share copy is and the URL of your content. And they have people on the other side of things who are taking content that people submit and sharing that to their audiences. So it's kind of like boosting a post on Facebook in a way, but not having to pay to boost the post. I mean, you're paying Q Promote for a subscription, but when people share the content, it doesn't say sponsored, it's coming from other people. So again, a lot of this stuff is like oversimplifying things, but I'm just giving you ideas for different things that you could try to, get more eyes on your content. And then a couple of just like non-social, well, kind of social ideas. First, if you've documented all those Twitter handles like we talked about earlier, then go ahead and tweet all those people and just let them know you're in this article. I also like to pitch to relevant newsletters. There's a lot in the WordPress space. So if I've taken a lot of time to put together a topic, I'll say, hey, maybe this would be something interesting to share in your next newsletter. And to make it fair so that I'm not just always asking them for stuff, I always share, like their content on my social channels. So you have to think about that too, like the push and pull of good social media promotion etiquette. Syndicating content is something to look into. Business to Community is a site that probably would be relevant to a lot of people here just because it covers a wide span of topics. You never want to create a duplicate content issue where you're like sharing your content on another website without the proper process for that. So that's something that another thing to maybe dig into after this presentation, like what is duplicate content and how do I prevent that? But syndicating content, if you do it the right way, is a legitimate way to increase eyes on your content. And it just means basically resharing it on another website, but the right way. If you have an email list, make sure you're sending that out. So another thing you might add to like your document, your draft, is some copy to share like on an email. And then you might also take your blog a step further and create a content upgrade for it, also known as like a lead magnet, which is basically like, let's say that I created I had a blog actually about this topic, which is like blog post promotional ideas. So I might have a lead magnet that's like an ebook they could download or something like that. So, or like a checklist or something. So it's just something that you kind of add on that adds value that also, you know, encourages people to sign up for your email list. Orbit Media, since we started with them, we'll end with them. They say, make sure someone's waiting for the blog post before publishing it. So, you know, it shouldn't just be like radio silence when you publish something, you know, try to tease it, like, you know, give people some, share some social content about how you're putting it together. Like, are you talking to different experts? Maybe you could tease who those people are, or, you know, did you find out something like really interesting? Maybe you could tell people that fact and tell them to tune in on a certain date to get more information when it's live. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. And I will remind you once again, you can grab the slides on Twitter, and you can also get in touch with me at any time. If you have any questions, I would love to help you with your blog post creation journey. So.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Maddie. That's great. Hey, that's like a master class in SEO and content creation. I appreciate
I
that.
tried to pack a lot in.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. Thank you. Hey, would you mind turning your screen share off for a minute?
Oh, yes.
And I'll go to
Okay, here we go.
we're gonna go back to we're gonna do we don't have a ton of time, so there's a couple questions.
Sure.
And also, would if you maybe even in the next session, would you mind posting a couple links to some of the blog posts that you could showcase,
Sure.
kind of like with your mechanics and techniques into them? That'd be great. Into the chat would be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can think of something, no worries. But
I'll think
yeah,
of something.
yeah. So I can't seem to find myself here. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So I had to stand up, guys. Sorry, I'm in a little different position. All right. So questions. Feel free to ask the questions if you want to unmute yourself. This is a good time to unmute. Otherwise, we'll pull from the chat. Wonderful information. Thank you, Tina. I know we had a bunch of feedback. A lot of people said that they like to print out what they write and read like the printout, and I agree. Like sometimes
Especially
that works for self-editing. Also, I like to look at it on my mobile phone. For some reason, like I catch a million different typos if I look at it on my mobile phone versus looking at it on the desktop that I just wrote on. So
it's
just
all about frame switching, and it's like the same thing with how you learn information. Like that's why it's so cool to like go to a coffee shop. I wish we could do that right now and just, you know, stay there and be in a different environment, because it switches the way you think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, too, I know like we live in a rush world. I'm sure you feel this way a lot, Maddie, where it's like you want to get it out, you want to get it out. But
Oh
if
yeah,
you give yourself like at least a couple hours or a day to reread what you wrote, like you could make it a ton better. But for me, it's like I want to write, publish, write, publish, write, publish. But you got to
totally.
do what you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say like I try to separate outlining, drafting, and editing to different days if I can. But even if you just do different work sessions, that could work too. So you could do it all in one day, you know, morning, afternoon, evening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we have a question from Heather Melser. In terms of getting a shout out to someone on Twitter that you quoted them in your blog, or especially when they use a quote template like you showed in your article,
Hmm.
um, do you ask permission first?
Um, if it's something that's like published somewhere else, not necessarily. And if they're participating in an expert roundup, I mean, I'm making it clear that I'm going to share that with other people. So I guess it depends on the nature of how you came across that information, or if it seems like something that's like privileged. Like if it was something that you got from maybe like a gated download where you have to like give your email, like maybe that would be something you would want to ask about
Hmm.
because it's just a different way of accessing the information.
Right. You want to help. You don't want to overshare their funnel kind of thing. But
Right.
yeah. So Sarah Epting, Sarah, thank you for being with us all day. I appreciate the following here, or the coming online here. How often do you think it's ideal to publish to
So
Maddy?
I tell my clients that there's no ideal, right? Like it depends on the brand, it depends on your goals, it depends on your audience. You also have to think about Google and being consistent. That's like the only thing that I care about. So what I tell my clients is if you could post once a month but do it consistently, that would be better than posting 3 times a month 1 month, 0 times a month for 2 months, 6 times a month, the next month or whatever. Basically just consistency is key. Nothing else is as important as that.
I have another question too, and this is something that I get a lot. Like, and I don't know necessarily always can answer it, so I like to get your feedback. People talk about SEO, right? And it's like I always say it's a long-term campaign. It's not something that you can necessarily, unless you really, really hit the ground running. Like
Yeah.
it's a campaign that can take 6 to 12 months. I mean, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you how, like if you were to say, hey, I'm going to rank something? I mean, I know obviously there's complexities to that, but if you want to rank for something, I mean, do you think it's something you can do quickly, or do you feel like it's something that could take a while?
Yeah, again, it depends on a lot of factors. I think one of the main factors is like how old is your website? So people talk about domain age, and it's not just about how old is your website, it's like how long have you been actively trying to like build links, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Like having a process for that, but like, are people linking to you? Have they been doing that for a while? If not, how can you increase that? So backlink building is something that like people in content don't always talk about, but it's so important. And I think one good way to build backlinks to your website is again that idea of expert roundups. Like instead of just asking people to participate in yours, like participate in theirs. There's a tool called Haro, Help a Reporter Out. Sign up for it, sign up for the emails because that's like the easiest way to do it. And that's oversimplifying things, but
Yeah, I love Haro. I actually kind of have gone back and forth on that over the years. I've subscribed and unsubscribed to it, but honestly, if you
it's a
can
lot.
get if you can get a mention in like a Forbes article, that could be a huge opportunity. Plus, like I
Mm.
was trying to get Creative Your Ever plugged somewhere, so I was on there every day, like emailing
Yeah.
everyone. And you never know, like not a lot happened, but it doesn't mean that 6 months from now something comes through. So it's just a good way to. Also, I got a really great tip one time from another PR person.
Hmm.
You write these pitches for Haro, and at the end of the day, you can take these pitches and turn that into blog content too. It's like
Totally.
basically it sort of forces you to write blog content, so it's a good thing to do.
And I would think that would be another great thing. Like if you're using Evernote or a note-taking system, like whatever you're pitching, like copy that because you might be able to reuse it if somebody didn't end up using it. So
Right, exactly. I give them a couple. I'll give them a couple weeks, and if I don't hear from them, then I'm going to turn that
that's
into
all
good
yours. Yeah.
content or script it. It's a script. Use it for video content too. So yeah.
Totally.
So Maddie, wow, I love everything you're doing. Keep it up,
Thank you.
especially the WordPress stuff. So it's
Absolutely.
4 o'clock, so we're gonna hop on over. And I have to say,